I went through the most difficult, tragic moment in my life when my little sister was killed in an accident and I was there with her. That was an extremely challenging life situation to contend with, to deal with, and to move through. So I went to a grief therapist, and I had family, and I had friends, and I had all this support. And I needed more. I turned to music and would play every day and use the music to just move the pain through me and hopefully out of me. The love actually doesn't go away. It persists. The physicality of the person that is no longer with you. The love is always there, even though she's not here. Coming through the other side of that, seeing the power of music to heal in such a profound way. The power of music to not mend a broken heart, but to further open.
Welcome. Awesome to have you in the space. Thank you for coming on the show. I think a great place to start is for you to give me a little background. You have a very unique background, achieving high success in the tech world and playing that game. And then at some point, deciding to completely leave that world and pursue more artistic, more mindful way of living. So what is that story is?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Khalil. And I think framing it as a game is I very much relate to it in that way. You know, we always kind of frame the narratives of our lives in hindsight. Like as we're creating them, we don't really know what the ultimate narrative might be. It's in hindsight that we can kind of stitch the patterns together, put the quilt, the tapestry of our lives together, thread the breadcrumbs that we've left behind. But as we're laying the breadcrumbs down, it's harder to know where they might lead. But, now I can look back, maybe frame some of the narrative in that sense. From a teen age, I very much wanted to get out and see the world. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up in a very insular, very parochial community, a lot of religion, a lot of kind of academics and community, very much insulated from the rest of the world in that sense. For most people, the pathway of where you might study, what you might study, where you would live, who you might marry. A lot of that was really laid out. A lot of family businesses, immigrant stories. My grandfather, all my grandparents came to this country around 1915 or so, about 100, plus years ago.
Where from?
Mostly from the Middle East, from Aleppo, Syria, as Jews that really couldn't find safe living in those countries anymore after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And so they saw the writing on the wall that it was not going to be safe there. And they left with nothing. My grandfather came to this country around 15 years old without a penny in his pocket. Classic story. Took a ship over, landed in Ellis Island, and started to peddle tablecloths and handkerchiefs on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, living in tenements, and eventually built a family business in textiles, as we call the schmata business in New York City. Many of my family members, cousins, uncles run that. I tried that for a brief minute when I was about 22, but I realized it wasn't the creative expression I was really called to do. Going back to the game of how we spend our time and what, for me, the initial game was one of survival, wanting to really stake a flag in the ground of my own identity, my own expression. And so when I was able to do that at 18 and technically leave the house, I traveled the world for a year. I didn't even tell my folks where I was going. I just grabbed a backpack and disappeared in an age before smartphones. This was before the internet.
That's pretty rebellious of you.
And it was just really taking a stand for my own individuality. Even though I didn't know what that really was going to look like, I wanted to explore that for myself without the burdens. What was my life going to look like? What did I want my life to look like? What did I want to do? I wanted the freedom to explore that, but I had to break away to do that. At first, I had to physically create that stance. And so I traveled to the far side of the world. I remember looking at a globe in my room, like a physical globe, not on a computer screen. I think I probably got from my bar mitzvah. And it was on my desk, and I said, what's the furthest place from Brooklyn, New York on this? And it was the South Pacific. It was Australia, New Zealand. And I bought a one-way ticket. With money I had saved up, I bought a one-way ticket And I had no idea what I was doing, where I was going. And I bought one of those Lonely Planet guides, and I just started reading it and had the adventure of a lifetime during that year, doing most of it on a bicycle, riding over 10,000 miles through countries and landscapes and communities, and living in villages and meeting incredible people. You know, when you travel on your own, it's a forcing function for adventure, for engagement,
right?
Because you don't have the camaraderie, the sense of humor of your friends to just lean back on and act as a barrier to engaging with other people. It could be strangers or just foreign cultures. You're forced to engage.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So it was just a wondrous time. But then I came back and felt like I needed to have a real education in what was calling me, which was music. And while I studied piano and cello when I was younger, I wanted to get a more formal education in it and become a composer. And I really felt like I had my own thing to say with music in terms of my own expression. There's some technical skills, 100% tell you that. So to write for orchestra, to really understand, harmony and theory and all that. So I went and studied that formally at New York University. That was a beautiful experience of learning and growing there. But after I graduated, I was like, how am I going to now make a living with classical music, with composing classical music? And folks with my degree, they might have gone into, composing jingles for TV or things like that. And
didn't sound that exciting, I'm sure.
Didn't sound very exciting. And I would talk to some of these composers and I'd be like, when did you write your last symphony? And they're like, write my last symphony? What are you talking about? Right. I'm on deadline all the time, right? That really was a rude awakening for me, that if I was going to use music as a pathway to pursue self-realization, right? And I mean that in the fullest sense. Like for me, at that age, music was the modality. It was the language through which I was exploring my inner world. And I would sit at that piano, throughout my teenage years in high school, through college. I would just play and just feel through whatever was going on. It was easier for me to express with music what was harder with words. But not just my emotions, but also the external world, including the cosmos, and understanding the universe around us through music, because it became clear to me at that young age were pure vibration. Yeah. And music is the purest language of vibration that we have. And because it's multidimensional, right? We have polyphony and harmony and these rich interweavings of vibration. It actually has a chance reflecting the nature of the universe around us because of nature's complexity and multidimensionality. And so everything from the movements of a subatomic particle to undulating gravitational waves moving for billions of light years through the fabric of space and time. Like, how do you represent that? What is the sound of the universe? If it could have a conceptual sound, right? Well, what would that even be? I've just dedicated that part of my life to sounding that, if that makes any sense.
It does, yeah. Right, that's the music part of it.
So I kind of went into that. But then at 22, I was like, okay, all that sounds great, but how am I going to pay the bills with that?
Right? Let me ask, so at 22, you already had thoughts about self-actualization and the bigger...
the bigger picture, because that came from... I got very lucky because at that age, I was externally seeking, because I realized that the tradition I grew up in, with was Orthodox Judaism. The tradition I grew up in, I mean, it is beautiful and rich and historic, and it is filled with endless wisdom. But for me at the time, I didn't find it there. So, and not that you can't, but for me, I didn't find it there at the time. So I started to just seek wisdom all around me and an understanding of my own place as a confused teenager trying to make their way through the world like all of us. And the age-old questions of who am I? What is this all about? What the hell's going on here?
Yeah.
And I found Eastern philosophy. In particular, I picked up a book, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, and it just opened me into that whole world of Eastern philosophy. And then from there, I just went deep down the rabbit hole. I picked up that book, and I had it in my backpack, and I opened the first pages when I was on a subway ride from Brooklyn to Manhattan. And I opened the book to the first page and I started reading it. And I'm sure, like many of your listeners who have read that book, you know that when you start reading that book, if it's the right time for you to read that book, you cannot put the book down. And I couldn't. And I was probably 17, maybe 18. Nice. And I read it cover to cover on this subway ride, missing my stop, in the Village of New York City, and ended up at the last stop somewhere in the Bronx, and then turned around and rode the subway back, and was in this kind of timeless vortex, going into the narrative of this story and what it really opened up for me. It was one of those books that for me at the time felt like it was written just for me. We all find those books in our journeys. Mm-hmm. But then after. So I did have that influence, and then found meditation, and just went into many different modalities. At the time, primarily Zen Buddhism, and stayed in monasteries, and then studied the music of these traditions. So Japanese Zen Buddhism in particular has a very rich music meditation lineage. The monks in the 17th and 18th centuries would write these meditative pieces for bamboo flute. It's an instrument called the shakuhachi, and it's a beautiful, beautiful bamboo instrument. The Japanese have such an incredible way of describing everything, and the way they describe the sound of this flute is that the shakuhachi, or the bamboo flute, makes the sound as if the bamboo was being plucked out of the ground. So this yearning feeling, this sense of wanting to return to source, like that's the sound of this instrument. Yeah. And the music that these monks would write were prescriptive. They are prescriptive pieces for breathing meditation, for sound meditation. And I spent years studying with two masters this repertoire, this lineage. Staying in Zen temples and monasteries and studying this for days on end, and studying for years with these two great masters, one who has since passed and the other is a living national treasure now in Kyoto, Japan. And I would host him in New York every year and study with him. So his name is Yoshio Kurohashi. Then his name changed to Yodo Kurohashi when he was given this title of Japanese living national treasure. Incredible human being. I
would imagine he's fairly well known
in these circles. He's very well known. Yeah. And he truly is a treasure, living embodiment of this lineage. So I had the great fortune of studying with him, and that really established this connection with sound, meditation and mindfulness, consciousness, really. Explorations into consciousness, all through sound. So then when I graduated and I was like, how am I going to now make a living with all this and pay the bills? Yeah. It was quite challenging. So that's the time when I started to work for the family business. After 6 months, I just didn't see the pathway there. Yep. And I was having this conversation with my older brother about my frustrations at the time. And he was working in neuroscience at the time at the NIH down in Bethesda, Maryland, with the government. And he got to see the earliest days of the internet. We're talking about 93, 94, early days. And so he and I started chatting. He said to me, have you ever seen this thing called the internet? I mean, can you imagine that question?
Totally.
Of course, I was like, I think I heard about it. And so he comes to New York, he shows it to me, and we didn't know what it was going to be, I mean, today with technologies like AI and crypto, these new technologies, right, that have, even though they're new, we now know like what's possible with technology. And so you can kind of, but with the internet, it was so rudimentary. Right. It was just text. You couldn't even have images. There was certainly no video. It was not clear what it was going to become, but we were just so enamored by it. Yeah. And I think it tapped into the value for me, Khalil, of connection. Growing up, I think I really felt, even though I grew up in a loving home and a community and all these things, I did feel this sense of disconnection with that kind of core part of myself that was seeking something more cohesive. And so, you know, I had this sense of disconnection. And I think we end up pursuing, you know, in life, what kind of fills the holes of our childhood. And so when something that represented such pervasive connection, like the internet did, right? You're connecting now millions of people, which then became now billions of people. Wow, that's a first. Well, that intrigued me. I didn't know what we were going to do, but I was like, that's intriguing. And it has nothing to do with music, and it doesn't have to. And so we just jumped in head first, not knowing what the heck we were doing. And we ended up building an incredible company called EarthWeb, which in the beginning primarily built massive websites for big organizations. The first customer was the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, which I completely cold pitched. And it was a wild pitch, but we got it. And
you came in person and said, we can build it for you.
Well, I called up and was routed. No one knew what I was talking about. You know, a website, a what? What are you talking about? And eventually was routed to the chief technology officer's office, and
which they already had something like that.
Yeah, they did, because they had technology for running the museum, right?
That's true.
They didn't have a website. They had nothing to do with the internet. But they had technology, certainly. And so the assistant that picked up put us in his schedule. I only found out years later that she recognized my last name from the high school I went to because her sibling went to the same high school or something crazy like that. So she just recognized the name and said, I'm going to give this kid a shot. You know, I remember I was like 24, 23 at the time. I was 22 when I started it. And so we got them, you know, probably the next year. So we got the meeting, and in preparation for the meeting, we just went crazy. I spent 2 days in front of the museum with a survey, with a clipboard, and I recruited a buddy of mine to just ask people coming up the steps of the museum questions like, have you heard of the internet? And if they did, would they go on the internet to learn about the museum? Would they view galleries? Would they view art? Would they just want information? I compiled this 100-person survey, which is pretty good.
Pretty great, yeah.
Compiled it into a spreadsheet, showed up with that at our meeting. Not only did I show up with that, I went to the museum. I bought their very expensive, it was like a $60 or $80 catalog of art. We scanned it in. Over the course of days, we scanned in all these images from the book.
What scanning with what?
Well, like a scanner, just like a fax machine.
Like
an old fax machine scan. So we scanned in these images. And then we created a fake website, like a faux website of what it could look like. Because it was so new, I felt like we had to visualize it for them.
Totally.
And so we then show up with a fake kind of website.
A mock-up, basically.
A mock-up. But like many pages, galleries and all kinds of information. We show up with this survey. We show up with like a early tablet from a French company called Dauphin with a stylus, you know, like that people can theoretically walk around and look at art. Like just
showing them the vision, basically.
Exactly. And then we're like, I don't know what kind of computers they have in this room. So we brought our own computers. Okay, like before thin flat screen monitors, we brought a big tube monitor. And we took it in a New York City taxi cab uptown.
Like carrying it?
Carrying it. They're just carrying it. Like, and we got out of the taxi cab in front of the museum with a big computer monitor and boxes and laptops and all kinds of things. And just walk in to this, to the door security. Okay, we go to the little conference room. We set it all up. He walks in and we show him this and he's like, what? He's like, has anyone else seen this? He's like, first of all, you broke several laws by scanning in all of our artwork, but okay, we'll leave that aside. Anyway, he was so impressed. And we ended up getting the deal. We created the Metropolitan website. I personally remember acquiring metmuseum.org. building the website. I ended up having an office on site to do all the official scanning and cataloging of that. And so I had an office in the Metropolitan Museum of Art for about a year and a half, and just got to walk around the museum and create that with them. Then we created the first e-commerce store for their gift shop online.
Wow.
And so it was really quite cutting edge at the time. But anyway, that's what we built. And then many other very high profile websites that we created. Wired magazine rated us, top in the country at a certain point in those years. And then we took the company public in 1998. Actually on the model of expanding from that to becoming more of a media property, where we started to actually create websites of our own, writing about tech. And so all techies back then were trying to stay up to speed on the latest tech because it was all so new.
Yep.
And so we then created properties, our own properties, media properties, websites that would be repositories of code and very, when Java came out, these were Java applets being shared. And it was all this technical information, but also articles about that. And that grew in popularity very quickly. And then we had advertisers and sponsors. And so we became a bit of a media property ourselves and took that public in what ended up being a record-breaking, like third biggest IPO or something in NASDAQ history at the time. So it was quite a ride. And then we raised...
When you went public, how many people were part of the company?
Oh, I don't remember exactly, but I'm sure it was probably... I'm sure it was probably a couple hundred at the time.
Yeah.
And then we took it public, and then with the stock and cash, and I personally... I headed up the acquisition and growth strategy. And so I traveled around the country at the time, speaking to other web properties that fit with ours. And we did about 24 acquisitions of other companies, from small ones, about, from 3 million, where it's a kid. This one was a kid. He was 16 and he ran a website that was phenomenal. And we bought his company for $3 million, and his parents had to sign off on it. I mean, they really did.
That's right. So what was that about? What was he saying?
That he was writing about code, a certain kind of code, and I remember that he was also being courted by another company to buy his site, and he came to New York. He was from Texas, I believe. He came to New York to have the negotiation. The other company that was competing for it was also in New York. And so he came to us and was going to meet with them after. And I sensed that I'm not sure if we really had it zipped up. I think he was going to go over and they might offer a little more. I don't know. But then I found out when I read online, I read some research, and I found that he has a passion for airplanes and he wants to be a pilot one day. Okay, I read this in something he wrote. And so happened to be that my brother and I were getting on a private plane, not ours, but of our bankers, to go do these, roadshow meetings. And I said to him, look, if you can agree now, here's the paperwork. If you can agree, let's get your folks on the phone. If we can agree on these terms, you can fly with us in the cockpit of this jet.
Yeah. Wow. You knew what buttons to press.
So he's like, really? I mean, not in the plane, in the cockpit, in the, what is it called? The jump seat? He's like in the jump seat with the pilots. Okay.
Yeah.
He's like, really? I said, yeah. I said, look, this is a fair deal. Let's get your folks on the phone. Whatever you need, let's make it happen. He signed the paperwork. We went to the airport and we got on the plane. So, but anyway, that time was really quite wonderful, engaging with people around the country, and really sharing a vision of coming together to build something, meaningful. And we built, a property through the EarthWeb network of properties of dozens of websites that reached millions of tech professionals. Right. And then out of that came dice.com, which was also an acquisition when it was fledgling. It was a tiny company. We then expanded it, and till today, it's the largest career site, job board, for a tech person finding a job.
Yeah.
So that's what it became. And, we ended up building that company from just a few million in revenue to, now, 100, 200 million in revenue. So it ended up being a great ride building all that.
Yeah.
And then getting through, of course, the .com bubble burst. we had to really restructure, sell off. Advertising went from here to nothing. And we had to quickly scramble to restructure the company. We had to sell off the sites that were burning money. Remember, those are the days when it was all about growth. And profit was less important. We had to shift that. And so we sold off the properties that were in the red, and we then unleashed a very profitable company because of the career side, because of Dice. And so I was very proud of like running all that. And then after we got through that whole crazy time, I ended up moving on, and we then built several other companies after that, my brother and I.
Wow. But you didn't really have a tech background. You didn't really fully understand.
Oh my gosh, zero. I
How
barely know how to turn a computer on. I mean, my brother was always the techie in the family.
Okay.
He always got us, he's my older brother, I'm second, and there's 5 of us. He always got the family, the latest computer. I mean, I'm talking about an IBM XT, IBM AT when we were little kids, and with the floppy disks, and it's crazy.
Right.
But he loved it. When I went to music camp every summer, he went to computer coding camp. Right. So he had that, drive, interest. I was into music and art and, photography and all that.
Yeah.
And so, but, my insecurity when we started the company was very apparent. I mean, certainly to me. So I was like, okay, I mean, we're both along for the ride, and let's see. And, we started hiring, programmers, developers, technical people. And, I was very intimidated, and I was like, how am I going to relate to these people? Like, I mean, they technically work for me. How are they going to respect me? Like and I couldn't come up to speed that quickly. I mean, I was,
yeah.
Now, of course, at that age and that time, no one was really an expert. We're all learning.
Right.
But still, I wasn't a coder,
Right.
So I just started to talk to them as a human being. And in those conversations, I realized how many of them played an instrument. And I started to, see the connection between, music and math and computers. And so many of them were violinists, pianists, and, just, as amateurs. And so we started to relate there. And then, of course, my strength was in evangelizing the company, was in human connection. And so I was more front-facing, dealing with customers, partnerships, and developing those partnerships. Eventually, with the acquisitions, sitting with someone, right, just like this, face-to-face, across a table or over coffee, and talking about probably the most important decision they would have to make, right, outside of who they might marry or having kids or something like that.
Yeah.
Probably the most important decision they would make in terms of selling their company. Something that they loved and they built. And now we're asking them to, bring it over.
Yeah.
And to sell that. Well, that's a big decision. And so I really enjoyed working with people during that process, and finding common vision, for that. And so then my role, I really started to get more comfortable with my contribution in a very different way.
At what point did you recognize that you have this unique ability to deeply connect and have that emotional intelligence to understand where people are and create that deep connection so you can collaborate, you can negotiate, you can just, at what point did you have that awareness?
I think I was fortunate in growing up in a family and a community where it was very entrepreneurial. My grandfather, as I mentioned, was an entrepreneur, came with nothing, built a family from nothing. My father.
Like a second nature for you. You were just...
Second nature. Yeah. Everyone around us. The first money I made kind of part-time as a kid, I was about 15. And I used to go to the flea markets of New York City. They were in Queens, the Bronx. These are weekend flea markets where you would go to these outdoor, tented. They still happen.
Yeah.
And there's hundreds of vendors. Yeah. You bring your wares and you sell them.
Sure.
And I would take clothing that my dad's business was making for kids clothing. Of course, my dad made me pay for them wholesale, so I had to buy them wholesale, and then I would take cartons in the car and go over to the flea market. I had to buy a table and a tent and display my wares, my goods, and then negotiate. right? You're negotiating with, moms with 4 kids, trying to get warm jackets for the winter.
Very cool.
It
trained you, yeah.
It trained me in negotiating and real-time training. And I did that for a long time. And, I would walk away each weekend with $500 in my pocket. I was like, wow, this is like amazing.
Wow.
So, that's where some of my training came. And it was invaluable. And so I always kind of had that in my blood, in my bones.
Yeah.
And then I think just the music influence, I just started to see even conversations like music and relationships like music and just seeing the flow of them and really being maybe just a little better than someone else at listening, right? Because ultimately, when you're doing a deal, whether it's, a contract to be a customer or buying someone's company or whatever the deal is, you have to hear what the needs are, right, of the other side, of the other person. And it may be that the other person works for a bigger company. Well, now what are the needs of the company, but what are their needs within their company? And really listening for that. And satisfying that so they could be the hero in their world. Right. Yeah. So it's understanding all of that and the dynamics and the psychology. I mean, even down to things like when to make an offer. I came to understand with this certain person that I sensed that his relationship with his wife was so tight that they made financial decisions together in such a partnered way. Not everybody's like that, right? Especially if it's, the business that the guy runs, that he started. Many people don't discuss it, Right. It's just his decision. But I sense that this was they were in partnership here. And so I remember thinking, I'm going to make this offer, this counter offer to this person on a Friday right before the end of the day. So that he has all weekend to talk about it with his wife. Now, it might have been a little manipulative because I know that when a good offer is sitting there for several days before he can get back to me, say on Monday, that the anticipation just is going to grow. And it's like
it will work towards you, like in your favor, basically.
I think so. Yeah. So really understanding kind of how someone operates, and then working with that. But of course, then you have other scenarios like someone who comes back and says, "Murray, you've been wonderful to work with. This was an acquisition. You've been wonderful to work with, full respect. But we decided, me and my 2 partners, we're not going to sell the company. We want to keep doing it on our own. And thank you very much." And this was at the 11th hour. Like we were really like weeks of negotiate. Like this was at the 11th hour. And I was so bummed out. This was a big deal.
Right.
And oh my gosh, it was transformative.
You would take it like personal, as if you didn't do enough.
Well, and I just, for our company, I was like, this was such a great opportunity. And it was a lot of money to them. Like it was good for everybody. It was really win-win across the board. But they just psychologically weren't ready. He said to me, I just came into my office this morning and I couldn't imagine coming back to this office and this desk not being mine anymore. Because he was going to continue on working, right? That's one of the things we loved, is that these entrepreneurs continue with us. And he just couldn't wrap his head in the framework of that, right? Now, of course, I could have said, well, I'll let you own your desk. No, that wasn't the point, right? That was just a symbol. So instead of, what many people might have done, which is, to get angry or scream or how could you do this? We had a deal, but you should hold it. I just listened to him and I said, I totally get that. I can relate to that. And I want to thank you. And look, if there's anything that we can do, let's pick this up. Let's pick this conversation up. And so I said to him, look, I said, if you're willing to do this deal, I said, look, we can up the numbers. We can, we can do it. Just give it some thought. We really want to partner. See where that goes. And I think because of my tone and my listening to his needs in that time, he called me back. It's about 2 days later, he called me back. He said, I thought about it again. And just your whole response to what really was a letdown. Like, and we, because they had agreed, like we were going down that road.
Yeah.
And he says, your response, I just so impressed upon me the kind of organization you are and your company. And he said, you know what? I feel better about it now. And we're going to go forward with the deal. I said, okay, look, last time we spoke, I said I would up the offer. And so I'm happy to honor that. He says, I don't even want that. He says, we had agreement. I'll stick with that agreement. I mean, fascinating, right? He could have got probably an extra $1 million or $2 million or something like that out of the deal. And he actually forewent that. And again, because of just kind of character, I think on both sides came to light.
Can you teach that skill somehow and not just have it through years and years of practice? Is it a teachable skill?
Well, I think it's a values-based teachable skill, right? It's not instructive step by step. It's more of it has to do with really listening to what someone's needs are, right? In this case, right, he had a real sense of pride and ownership in what he had built. And also there was clearly a sense of being part of another organization was threatening to him. Because he could clearly, if he believes that the desk is not his anymore, then what does that signify? Well, it signifies that he has some kind of thing with authority, some kind of thing with being told what to do, which is why he's an entrepreneur in the first place, most likely. And so he wants this autonomy. He wants, but at the same time, he understands being with us is going to help grow his business. And he had a bit of an internal conflict, right, with this. But my response to him, I guess, showed that he could be part of an organization and be with like-minded, like-valued people where we're partnering and growing together versus, he's got some boss in New York City. Meanwhile, he's in, the Midwest somewhere. And, and there's different value sets, right?
For sure. Yeah.
So he actually, I think that created some coherence for him. Was in my response. And my response was rooted in values, was rooted in listening, was rooted in some kind of humanity, right, for someone else's needs. And I was willing to walk away from it also without getting worked up about it and without, having the last word, like, you have, you are.
Yeah, so, screw you type thing.
Yeah, screw you kind of thing, right? Yeah. So if I did that, I've seen many people do that. And they might feel justified. They do feel justified in that. And yes, in a way, he would have gone against his word of agreeing to what we had. But that wouldn't have helped the situation.
For sure. What about being a visionary? You've always had that kind of skill also, or that ability to envision things and right? Is that the...
Yeah, so I think that's more, again, back to the values of what interests me. Like, no matter what the field, like in tech, if somebody would have said, hey, I've got this great idea for a business that makes these widgets, 27% more effective, and we can make a fortune with this little piece of tech. Like, I don't know. It's like, it's being done. Okay, we'll do it a little better, but I don't know. It doesn't really get me out of bed. It doesn't get me going. Same with music, right? Like, yeah, I could be a musician that plays the music everyone else plays and write stuff and do stuff that I'm sure could do commercially well. It just doesn't excite me at all.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we use whatever industry, modality, whether it's tech or music, in a way that evolves and grows ourselves and humanity, right? That's what interests me. That's what excites me. It's like, I'm trying to grow myself and be part and be a contribution to the growth of others.
Yeah.
And that was the case in technology. We did things that, grew that whole world at that time. And the same with music now. Everything I do in terms of not just what I play, but the whole format, the whole experience of what I do is pretty radically different than, what's out there.
How would you say, what's the relationship between that vision of what you want to do and purpose? Is that the same thing, or is it basically, how does that work?
For me, I tie purpose to values. And also I tie purpose in an Eastern context to what we might call Dharma. Dharma is this kind of Sanskrit, Eastern notion. for me, the way I describe and define Dharma is anything you do, anything that you do, especially kind of a life path that connects you more deeply to source, to ultimate source, which is to the ultimate all-pervasive awareness of the universe. Now, music is certainly that for me.
Yeah.
But the stepping stones to that, because that's a very big and broad statement.
Yeah.
The stepping stones to that, like how do you know that that's the case? The telltale signs is what you're doing in alignment with your values, right? And of course, your values are these course corrective ways of being that you invest meaning into because they find a place of healing within you.
Yeah.
Right. It's like what I talked about earlier, connection being one of my values. Well, it's because I felt disconnected and part of the growth of life is healing that. And so connection, forging connection, creating connection, experiencing connection will heal, right?
Yep.
That sense of disconnection. Also recognizing that there was never disconnection. That's another part of it, but that's a deeper conversation anyway.
Yeah.
But some of the perception was that, right? So that's where the values come from, is these healing kind of pathways that we lay meaning into.
Yeah.
And then the actions we take, right? If they are aligned with those values, then they will feel like a purposeful life. And that's why I was able to do tech, even though it had nothing to do with music. It had nothing to do with music. Nothing. Why was it so fulfilling? Well, because it had a Venn diagram with many of my values. Not all of them, but many of them. And so I was able, for all those years in my 20s and early 30s, I was able to feel purposeful because it was laden with so many of my value sets. And so it felt purposeful, even though it was a totally different industry. And so that's something I tell, especially young people who are like, when you talk about like, oh, find your purpose, it could be so platitudinal. Like it's so like, oh, dude, come on. It sounds so ridiculous. Like, and to the extent they're right.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. You can find purpose in many things, in many pursuits.
Of course, yeah.
Because you have to focus on those core values. So once someone can get in touch with what matters to them, the values that matter to them, now you can find the manifestation of those values in many different areas of pursuit.
Makes sense, yeah. It's interesting, maybe it's related. So I see two main ways of navigating life. You could be pushed by, say, fear towards a particular direction, or you could be pulled by some kind of attractor where you're just grabbing on the rope and you're being pulled where you don't really need energy to move forward. And the purpose is kind of like that attractor where once you find what's like pulling you in, then it's becoming effortless to move forward. We find, and so the meaning, if we find something meaningful, it becomes like it generates energy for you to keep moving forward. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think that on our journey, right, this push versus pull, it could be described also in the sense of, in life, we often are running away from something or running towards something, and what's the framing? Which one is it? It's all in both to a certain degree. But for much of my life, I was running away from something that I was like, I don't want that. Right. And that's back to the game framing, right? That's the game of survival.
Yeah.
Run away from something that you don't like. That's a danger to you. Right. And the danger to me was an existential one. Not my physical life. I would be alive, but I would feel dead inside, right? So it's an aliveness, and a full living of life that was at stake for me. And so then running towards is like, oh, really seeing a vision of what's possible and running towards it and be pulled forward by it.
Do you recognize when the switch happened? Is that once you reach a certain level in the hierarchy of needs, that's when the switch happens, or you could be pulled on any layer you think of?
I wish it was so linear. I don't think it is. I think we could describe it that way. Maybe it's helpful instructively, but I don't think it's I don't think it's the lived experience that people have. And that I've had. There was a certain point pretty young in my 20s that I was technically a millionaire and okay, I didn't have to worry about certain things, but I was probably still running away and running toward at the same time. So I think they operate with a bit more complexity. I think there's probably always something we're running away from.
Yeah.
Subconsciously. Maybe the ratio changes. Maybe the amount of things that are pulling us becomes so beautiful and overwhelming, but there might be some, and we might relate to that as our shadow. We might relate to that as some unresolved, tensions in life. And let's not forget, life continues to happen. There's always continued changes, right? Our conditions change. The world changes. So there might always be things that then surface and have to be contended with. And so I think there's always this calculus of circumstances that are less circumstances of our physical situation. Yeah, certainly you find yourself in a relationship. It's abusive. Yeah, you want to run away from that. Yes. Yes. Do you want to do that? Yes, exactly. So, but there's more subtle ones, right? That's obvious, but there's more subtle ones. The more subtle ones are something like, there's a belief that I still have that has such a grip on me that I haven't even realized how much I'm trying to run away from it, and I can't because it's a ball and chain that's got me connected and locked up. And it's been holding me back. So as much as I'm being pulled towards this light, how could you get there if you have a ball and chain holding you back? So what do you do with that? Well, first you have to recognize there is a chain on your ankle.
Right. There's a weight. Yeah.
There is a weight.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now do I do? I don't have the tools to get it off. It's too... But let me get the tools. Oh, now I have the tools. Okay. Now I got... So...
Yeah.
So...
100%.
So much of it is bringing into our awareness what these chains of belief even are.
Yeah. I have this useful framework that's been useful for me to relate to other people, to say everyone is doing their best at every moment in time, considering that everyone is carrying some amount of weight. And then the more there's a weight, the harder it is to move forward or to act optimally, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you're talking to someone who is skeptical at best about free will. So I will tell you that your comment of if we were to assume that everyone's doing it, no, everyone is doing their best.
Yes,
they actually are doing their best.
Yes,
with the situation they're in, they could do no other because no other is being done. They could do nothing other than what they're doing because that's what they're actually doing. If they could, they would.
Yeah,
but they can't. So
with this level of awareness, with the set of capabilities or abilities that they have, they can't do better than this.
That's right.
In the future, they certainly could. They might acquire new skills or new perspective, and they might act differently. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there has to be new data for that, new action. And so the data might come from their own growth. The data might come from an external influence. But in that moment, without sufficient data, without the information, they will act the way and only the way they're able to act.
So you left the whole tech world at what age? Or are you still...
Early 30s.
Early 30s.
Early 30s was when I officially, was like, okay, I'm going to explore other things. And that was probably, several companies later.
Yeah.
And then talk about unexpected circumstances. Then I went through the most challenging, difficult, and, truly tragic moment in my life when my little sister, 12 years younger, was killed in an accident, and I was there with her. So that was an extremely as you can imagine.
Yeah,
you know, challenging life situation to contend with, to deal with, and to move through. And it really had a difficulty on so many levels. And so, you know, I was in my mid-30s around then. And so that was really this this time when, like, you know, anyone who goes through something like that, you know, you of course enter into like an existential reevaluation of everything. You know, for me, leading up to that point, I really was very present to leading a life that was as kind of aware as I could, you know, possibly. And so there wasn't a lot. I was like, you know, I wasn't like, oh, I'm leading the totally wrong life here. Like, I need to really course. No, I was leading a life that, you know, was fulfilling and was aligned. And so it was more of like, how do I just get through this emotional and spiritual crisis? And nothing as intense as this, but I was like, it's the only thing I know that has a shot. And yes, I went to a grief therapist, and I had family, and I had friends, and I had all this support, and I needed more, you know. And so I turned to music and would play every day and use the music to just move the pain through me and hopefully out of me. And
not only pain, but also the grief is when the love doesn't know where to go. And so that love that was, you were kind of...
Yeah, it gets stuck. And then, it you know, the grief, the pain of grief that we feel is always in direct proportion to the love we felt for the person, love we feel for the person. So yeah, if you're experiencing profound grief, it's because you have profound love, and the two are hand in hand. Now, that has actually, it's within the problem lies the solution, right? So now, if you're able to kind of separate out, you know, the love and the grief, you can purify that cocktail back to its original love. So if you know, kind of an example I like to give is, you know, imagine like a pitcher of water that suddenly gets all muddy, like, you know, pour soil in it. Like it's like this just muddy, murky cocktail, you know. And you're like, oh, okay, that's not very appetizing to drink. And you can't see in it. It's like, oh, not good. Well, that's kind of like what grief is. You know, just all this silt and soil is poured into this pureness of water, and it's all swirled up and unappetizing. Well, when you do the work to get it to sift out, to let it settle, to filter it through, right? And there are different ways to do that. Time helps to a certain extent, right? So it's kind of interesting, right? Using this example, time will settle the silt to the bottom, but it's still there, and it can be worked up at any time, right? Okay, how do you really purify it so that the silt's not even at the bottom? You need more than time. You need time plus some filter. For me, music was that filter, as well as family and friends and that support. And then you slowly but surely filter that out, and you're left with the pure water, which is that pure love again. Because the love actually doesn't go away. It persists. The physicality of the person that is no longer with you. So it persists beyond my sister. The love is always there, even though she's not here. So that's what the project of healing through grief is about, reconnecting with the purity of love, filtering out, right, everything that is in the way of it. Right. Well, what's in the way of it? Well, what's in the way of it is all the emotional tangle, right? Such as not just the sadness, not just the depression, but the pain, the guilt, the sorrow, the yearning, just all of it. The anger. It's all in there. That's what's in the way of feeling the pure love again. So and they're all tangled up like a big ball of yarn that's all mixed up.
Would you say it's also maybe the processing grief is also a process of getting back to your essence of a non-physical kind of source, on which level we're eternal and we're all connected, and what died is the physical representation of her soul, and then knowing that really deeply, the deep knowing helps you to kind of reduce the amount of grief that you might have. I don't know if that's...
I would like to say yes to that, but in my experience, that doesn't help as much as you'd like. You know, when you're going through it, it's so overwhelming. I mean, it's so debilitating that those concepts are just that. They're conceptual.
Yeah.
And they're hard to really embody at the time.
I understand.
Now, I did, part of what, I was motivated to now not only deal with emotions and learn about emotions and the grief process, but also like really understand, theoretical physics in a deeper way because of this. Like, what's going on in the cosmos then allows something like this to happen, right? I mean, it was quite that. And so there is room for that, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But perhaps it's necessary, but it's never sufficient, because it's too conceptual. When every present thought at the time revolves around, she's not here,
right.
and she won't be here tomorrow, and she won't be here when we're both 70 and 80 and 90, rocking on our chairs in a front porch, reflecting back on, life's experience. And so that's all has just evaporated.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So it's...
Yeah, maybe it's the pre-work that would have helped in the situation like that, not what you come out of, in the process, you're just overwhelmed with emotions that you can't really...
Yeah, and I think even if you have a completely, at the one end, I'm talking about a Dalai Lama-esque aura awareness of enlightenment and all of it. Yeah, you got it all.
Right.
It doesn't mean that when you experience that level of grief, it won't feel completely intense. Mm-hmm. And part of having that level of enlightenment is actually allowing that pain and grief to wave through you.
Yeah.
Now, maybe with that deepest of understandings, it won't be years of grief.
Yeah.
It might be minutes.
Yeah.
It might be hours.
Right.
Right. But it has to be something, because we're still human organisms.
Yeah.
So we're still a body that has things moving and waving through it, including emotion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So now music. So that whole new chapter of being full-time musician in a way. I mean, at first you just used it for healing, but then it turned into more of something that you do for others as well, right?
Yeah, I think coming through the other side of that, seeing the power of what really became a practice, seeing the power of music to heal in such a profound way, the power of music to not mend a broken heart, but to further open a broken heart, and to allow the light to come through that broken heart. That's what music allows, that expression. So seeing that, feeling that, living that, I felt like, back to that, taking inventory of my life at the time, I was like, yeah, I have a good life. It's not about this, intense course correction that some people might go through. Like, so
it wasn't like a wake up call, like, oh, I was doing it all wrong.
No,
right.
I was doing it pretty right. Not all of it, but some of it I was doing pretty right. So it wasn't that for me. Yeah, there were things I had missed. I was like, yeah, you know what? I stopped playing the cello a long time ago. I've just been playing the piano. Okay, so I bought a new cello and I started playing it. Okay, I mean, whatever. So but yeah, okay. I studied physics more. I maybe read more different kinds of books, but it was more on the margins than it was at the core of the direction. Yes. Did I, reach out to family members that I had not spoken to? Did I reach out to friends? Yes, I did more of that. Of course. But again, it was more on the margins of it. So it really was about, again, less kind of, looking at that push-pull again, right? And saying, it's not being so much pushed in one direction or another, but pulled into something greater, into a greater legacy of what I feel like I'm here to do. And while I identified and I had some success as an entrepreneur in the technology world, more success than most. But it was, and then when you become good at something and known for something, then it snowballs, and then you get more opportunities, and then and I realized that can continue to snowball in a certain direction, but is that really the direction I want to go in? So I was like, that's a nice chapter, but it's more meaningful to me. It's more aligned for me to share this music, to share this experience that has done so much for me, share it with others, and to have that be kind of this living legacy, just felt so right. And that's the shift I think that many people come to earlier or later, but at some point, about really leading a life of service,
and purpose.
Yeah. It's just something about that. And I remember reading, it might have been the Dalai Lama, I believe, but it was, if you want to be happy, make other people happy. And it's true with all that. It's like anything that you feel you want to experience, create that for someone else. And by definition, you'll receive it. So, okay. So if I want to feel healing, let me help heal others. If I want to feel joy, let me make others joyful. If I want to experience beauty, because I've seen how ugly life can be, let me create beauty for others. And I just put all my chips, all of them. I just put all my chips on that play, on that hand, and I haven't looked back now.
And so is that right around the time when mind travel kind of originated? Yeah,
it was a few years later, but there was a journey I had to go through in that time. It was no easy task coming through the other side of that.
Of course, yeah.
So
could you share with me the origin story of Mind Journey? How did that,
Mind travel? Yeah.
Mind travel, yeah. How did that all come about?
Well, once I made the decision, I was like, that's really what I want to do publicly, right? The difference that, doing it privately as my own practice for how many years was wonderful. But then shifting to say, I'm going to do it never had a name. It was never called mind travel. It was just what I did.
Yeah.
So when I made that conscious choice to put it out into the world, I really sat with that. I meditated on that. I was like, what is that going to look like? And it was clear to me from the beginning that I wanted people to come and have an experience as opposed to come see me play. It's very different, and especially in the world of classical music or music in general. You go see a certain performer.
Yeah.
You go see a talent. You go see, okay, that's what you're going to see.
Makes sense.
I wasn't as interested in that. Look, I was starting my music career a little bit later in life than most. So it was not about that. It was about, I've had a profound experience. I want to share this experience. What's the most effective way to transmit this experience? But I want you to come have an experience. So then I said, well, I have to name the experience and hopefully name it something that resonates with what it actually is. And I remember sitting at my dining room table in my home and with a friend, and I was like, kind of spitballing, brainstorming. And I said, it's something that, just takes your mind on to this other realm. It opens up something beautiful. It's like going on this journey, but journey, I don't know about that word. Maybe it's a little overused. And it's like you're traveling to, mind travel. It just clicked. It just kind of clicked in that moment. And I didn't even second guess. I just like,
that's it.
That's it. That's the name. And then I scheduled a date and did the first one in my living room. And I just had a few friends invite people, and about 40 people showed up. And then the other thing I said to myself was, if I do this, I really want to put forth the experience purely as I know it's worked for me in the privacy of my own home. That's how I want to put it out, and not chase, what I think other people might like. Now, it's important to frame it that way because you have to understand that a mind travel experience is a long form experience. And in an age, especially then, of, short form, 15-second videos and, attention scarcity, right? In this attention economy, how is an hour nonstop experience gonna play?
Sit with people, yeah.
How's that gonna sit with people? I mean, with no interruption. Not even okay, most concerts you go to, at least the music stops, you clap, okay, you can look at your phone for a second, okay. I mean, there's these micro breaks, right?
Sure.
And of course, many have intermissions. Okay, but no, nothing. No interruption. And that's purposeful because I want the mind to have time to settle and open, for our defenses to relax and to have a deep penetration of experience. Well, okay, how are people going to sit with that? So anyway, we did it. And I remember afterwards, this kind of, inaugural night in the evening in the hills. And I had a friend with a little video camera and tripod in another room. So would you mind just asking people if they would do a quick 1-2 minute interview and just see what they say? I'm just,
Sure.
So she would ask people, and she got about 15 or 18 of them to do quick little interviews privately. And I didn't know most of these people, so it's not like they were, doing me any favors.
Yeah.
I watched them the next day, and even in hindsight, half an hour later, they were getting emotional. They were tearing up. They were really moved by the experience, and it really showed me that, okay, maybe it's not just me, but there's others that would be open to this, that are open to this. So there's something here. And then that gave me the confidence, I guess, to then continue to put it out there. And one thing led to another. And, and then I had the idea to bring people to nature. And that's really what I wanted to do, was I know how healing nature is.
Yeah.
How connective she is. So how do I bring the audience, to nature and still have a very powerful experience musically with a piano that is a very subtle instrument. I'm not a rock band, kind of amplifying music at you, by blasting you with music, with sound that you can overcome wind and ocean sounds and, all the noise that's outdoors. And that's when I had the idea, going back 10 years ago now, to put the audience in headphones. And, again, talking about pushing the envelope and boundaries, I was the first to do that a long time ago, before everyone was having kind of silent disco, dance raves and things like that. And certainly the first to do it for a live concert experience, live music experience, and but it allowed for an immersion in nature and for a very intimate experience in a very open setting. And so it becomes like this soundtrack for what's going on externally and internally. And I was always fascinated. It's always fascinated me to really lean into this line of finding our expression as human beings, as these unique individuals, right? There's no one that will exist that will be the same as you, as me, as anyone listening, right? Each of us are our own unique flowers and fruits, coming out of the universe, right?
Right.
And there'll be literally no one like you. And out of billions and billions of people and trillions of future people, hopefully, right? I mean, there's really no one like you.
Totally.
And at the same time, we have this unequaled sense of, unity and connection with all people, with all things, with the whole universe. And how do we embrace that and lean into that and honor both and celebrate both, right? And not sacrifice one for the other, but find and embrace a perfect balance, right, between both of those expressions. that has always fascinated me.
Yeah.
And the music to me is about representing that, right? Or each note, like even though you might play a C or an F sharp or a B flat, you can never play it the same way twice. Each one has its own personality. And then each one combines with the other notes in context, right? To create polyphony and harmony and melody, that is ever changing and infinite. There are infinite combinations that could be made. So that, music is the perfect metaphor for all this, right? For the individual and the collective. So it's about, reflecting that. But that's what the experience, at the beach or in the park. I mean, that's what it became. That's what it has become. And so people show up, they put these headphones on, they're immersed into this inner world, yet somehow this immersion into this intimacy of their inner world suddenly connects them with the outside world. And that line of seeming division blurs and dissolves, and they have a sense of oneness. And I'm not just saying this is what thousands of people have said, in talking about this experience. So,
and it's interesting that you called it mind travel, because a lot of it has to do with the heart. Your mind maybe goes away on the trip and travels away, and then your heart stays here, and that's what really connects you to the source and to everyone around you.
It's a brilliant question, and so if you look at the logo, the symbol of mind travel, what is it? It's a heart.
It's a heart, yeah.
And it's specifically a heart made out of two bass clef musical symbols.
Symbols, right.
Right? The bass clef symbol, which is the left hand, or what's used by cello, but the bass clef, and its mirror reflection. And when you put the two side by side, right, they make a heart.
Yeah.
And I actually shade them so it's the symbol and its reflection. And the idea is that when we do reflect and we open up into the shadow, we experience the fullness of ourselves. We're not denying a part of ourselves, but embracing the fullness, the light and the shadow. But we get there through the mind. We don't want to discount the mind, but we must allow the mind to settle. When the mind opens, and we cannot create a distinction between mind and body. It is mind-body in the same way that you cannot separate space and time. Einstein taught us that it's space-time. One is integrated with the other. The mind and body are one. And so when we engage the mind fully and allow it to open and the defenses fall away, it's a direct pathway to the heart, because the heart cannot open until the mind is settled. If you're in your head and you're just analyzing everything, if you're in your ego, the ego resides up in here, And so if you're just in your ego, judging everything, opinions, right? Even if you're listening at a concert, think about how many people will come to a concert of mine or anyone, and they're like, is this guy any good? And this music sucks. I don't know about this.
Everything,
I could do better than that. Whatever,
all kinds of thoughts,
Now, you got no shot of being in the heart. But you have to release that, allow that to be released and to open. That's a pathway to the heart. And then all bets are off. Then you can open the heart and feel oneness, right? Feeling oneness will never be an intellectual pursuit.
For sure.
We can intellectualize it, but it'll never be felt. If it's never felt, it'll never be fully embodied.
100%. And from all of how many journeys have you already facilitated? Thousands, right? Any stories or experiences that were extra special? What happened for participants, smaller, bigger groups? Any distinct stories that you would like to share?
Oh my, so many, so many.
Sure.
And they're stories that have been written in by email to the website, by DM and Instagram, and personally shared to me after a concert, one-on-one, but also shared with the community live at the concerts, because I open the microphone after each after each event at the end, I bring another mic up and I invite anyone, and there, from hundreds and hundreds of people there, I invite anyone to come up and share themselves. I invite them to shift from just listening to being heard.
Yeah.
And the people that come up and share, I mean, such courage and such vulnerability. And it's everything from, my favorites are when the children come up. Oh my gosh. I mean, many families come, children come to these events, and it's wonderful for them, right? The kids put the headphones on and they're not stuck in a seat in a theater, right? No kid wants to be stuck in a seat. We don't even want to be stuck in the seat. They get to run around the beach. They put their feet in the water. They play. They're building sandcastles. They're in their imagination. That's where they live. They live in their imagination. The music becomes a soundtrack to their imagination. And so they come up without any inhibition, right? And they, as only children can be, they're earnest, they're honest, they're innocent,
pure,
and beautiful, and pure. And so a kid will get up, sometimes 8, 12, 6, they'll get up and they'll say, oh my gosh, I remember this one kid, he's like, so seriously, he's like, I just want to thank you. That was the most beautiful music I've ever heard in my life. I mean, this little kid, right? And he starts to express how he feels safe in the music. Wow, well, what does that mean? What's this kid's life like?
Right.
He feels calm. He feels peaceful, right? These are the words these kids are using. I'll have 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds get up, young girls, boys, and they'll talk about how much anxiety they've had that day, that week, in school, with friends, social pressure, right? And how that's subsided for them.
Yeah.
We think of a 12-year-old, what kind of problems could you have? An 8-year-old, what kind of problems could you have? You have a good family, you got a roof over your head, you got a comfortable bed, you got food, educate. What could be no, they have problems. Everyone's got something going on. It's all relative maybe, but for them it's as real as anything we're going through. So they have a place of sanctuary. They have a place of healing. And then you have seniors who come. I've had a 100-year-old man come. He was there with his daughter and 3 generations.
Yeah.
And he comes up and he said, I saw in the music, I saw my whole life. I saw the movie of my whole life in your music. I mean, think about that, what he's been through. I've had that happen quite a few times with folks that have, So, and then you have everything in between. People that are dealing with profound grief. It could be fresh. It could be days old, months old, to people that, they lost a parent 10 years ago and they're still feeling it and they're able to reconnect with a father, with a mother. People who have lost children, quite often they'll come up and share a connection with, a son or daughter that died, and they get to really feel them on this beach, right? And the ocean is such a powerful metaphor for what you said, in terms of feeling the oneness of everything, right? To really perceive with our whole being that, we might think of ourselves as these individual waves, but we all come and arise out of the same ocean, that they're feeling that fully there. They're getting that. It's not an intellectual enterprise anymore.
Right.
So that's what's showing up. It's a veteran who retired from special forces. And this 6'5", huge guy gets up to the microphone and I mean, a symbol of strength. You couldn't imagine a bigger symbol of strength, right? And he breaks down, and he's like, for the first time, I'm feeling, everything that I went through, things I did, things I saw. And he's able to process it for the first time.
Oh.
So, that's what's happening.
Impactful, very impactful, man. Do people often go to these sessions with the intention of healing? Do they know it's a healing space?
I think some do. I know a lot of people do some homework before they come. They might find, a TED talk I did about it, or, so they might find that. Yeah. And then they'll know, some of the origin story of this. but many don't. And then they might come through the recommendation of a friend. A friend just says, just trust me, just come, you'll like it.
Yeah.
Okay, they come. They don't even know what they're coming to. It's also hard to describe. Like, is it a piano concert? Yeah, kind of. I don't know, but not really. It's something more than that. But I think they feel it right when they get there. There's something special, and I really do my best. My team is great. We create an intentional space and just let the chips fall where they may,
For sure. And where do you go in those sessions? What kind of experience are you having? Is it like a, what's the word? Look like a flow state, right? Is that that's the goal for you to get to be as in the flow state as possible, so it comes through you. You're not even in the picture. You're just fulfilling the
Yeah, I could describe it that way, but again, that's going to be a retroactive looking at something. So, but in the moment, right? For flow state to emerge, you can't simply say, "Okay, let me get into flow state." You actually can't actually get into flow state. Flow state is emergent through a set of conditions and a set of ingredients, and it may or may not happen. So, the best we can do is create the circumstances through which flow can arise.
Right. Emerge. Right.
Okay, I just want to make that distinction because, just get into flow state. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So,
right. Yeah.
It's very nuanced because it's a state of consciousness. It's not, so it's not just something you do, it's a set of circumstances you create through which it arises. And so for me, I do my best to just get out of my own way as quickly as I can. And the set of practices that help me do that are very specific. So it starts with, I jump in the ocean. 90-something% of my concerts are at oceans, so the beaches. So that helps. If you're in a theater somewhere, I don't know where you can get an ocean, but but there's other things I do in theaters. But mostly at the beach, I will jump in the ocean and I will meditate in the ocean and then on shore, and just really deeply relax to settle my nervous system and to really bring in the power of the ocean into my being, so I can bring some of that into the music. So it's about settling the nervous system.
Yeah.
And then when I sit down, I then have a very specific practice. I take a little time in silence before I start. And remember, each concert, each mind travel is improvised. So I'm not playing a memorized piece or anything. It's a different journey down the river. But I always start with the same note. There's a few, but generally with the same note. It's a B flat because that pitch just resonates with me. But anyway, I start with the B flat, and I use it in the same way you might use a bell in the beginning of a meditation class, right? And why do they hit a bell at the beginning of a meditation class? In many traditions, the same reason why they'll ring the church bell at a certain time. These are practices. They're not just there to tell you what time it is, right? No, they're there to, in the sense they are. And they're there to tell you that the time is now. That's what they're there to tell you. Yes, they're there to tell you what time it is, and the time is now. So you hit the bell at the beginning of meditation class, and the time is now. And please bring your attention to the time, which is now.
Right.
Okay. I bring my time to now. And then I hit the bell again with the next note. And I essentially entrance myself. I charm myself into the moment with that, without the pressure of, I have to play something interesting as the first chord.
Of course.
That's a distraction. I could, you can try to do that, and it could be interesting. But a well-played single note, single note, there is nothing more interesting than that.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And so I'll play that first note, and I'll play it again.
Yeah.
Then I'll variate it. And the water starts to move.
Right. You're like catching the thread. You're starting with the thin layer, and then you're expanding it further and further.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And really think about it, like the first droplets of rain onto the top of the mountain, right? That's a good way to think about it. Like the first drop and drop. Like where do oceans come from? They come from a drop of rain that started at the top of a mountain that accumulated, and those drops turned into a little stream, which turned into a brook, which turned into, a river, and then found their way to the ocean. Every river leads to the ocean. And then, then it evaporates and finds its way back to the top of the mountain. Yeah. Okay, that's the cycle of flow. You talk about flow, that's real flow. So that's what it's about. And then it's about having no resistance once the water starts moving. Mm-hmm. And then just being with the current.
And what is the difference between, let's say, someone listening the audio track, let's say, in their own home, their own presence, and being physical with the community in the space and in time? Like,
it's like anything, being with other human beings by the ocean. Yeah. There's a coherence. Physically, there is. There's actually some wonderful research that has shown when you have an audience in a theater or just listening to music, when they're all listening to the same music, they actually have seen their brainwaves
synchronize and stuff.
Synchronize and cohere. Uh-huh. Remarkable. So, there's something physically happening, but also something emotionally powerful happening, right? And remember that coherence is not just happening in the brain, but in the heart.
Yeah.
Right? Our organ of the heart has an electromagnetism to it as well as the brain. So it's that kind of coherence that there's no coincidence that people are reporting, oh, I feel so connected to everyone here. I don't even know their names. I don't know anyone. But I feel so connected to them. Well, what a gift to feel that, especially if your day in and day out might be infused with a sense of loneliness and disconnection, right? Now more than ever, as we know, with the kind of epidemic of loneliness that is everywhere. So, so that's something, and it doesn't take hours of conversation with someone. I'm not putting people in rows and meet your new friend and talk about your favorite color. That's nice. Okay, great. But
that's connecting on the mind level. Yeah. What you're doing is connecting on the heart level.
It's on a soul. It's on a heart level. It's on an energetic level. It's on a human level. Transcending identity, transcending the details, transcending look and the surface, all the things that show up on the surface, color of my skin, color of my eyes, color of my hair, gender, whatever. It's actually all irrelevant, ultimately.
Yeah, I'm all about using whatever we have at hand, any tools, technology to, in a way to promote humanness, promote deep human connection, community, and you're doing that in such a beautiful way. And have you thought about you're already doing it at such like a scaled level, utilizing internet, and you mentioned during COVID that's kind of what you were doing. Have you thought about ways how to scale that even further with technology potentially? Or no?
Yeah, the pandemic was a good example, right, where my events went, literally to zero because we couldn't gather. We couldn't even gather outdoors. Beaches were closed, parks were closed, but it shut down. So, I said, I'm home. What am I going to do? So I said, well, okay, I could do a concert from my living room to others. So I did that. So I did virtual concerts. Okay, great. We got lots of people to come. Okay, it was good. Then the one thing we could do was walk. And because I do these walking meditation experiences, I was doing them in person, but okay, I'll do them virtually now. Mm. And so we started doing that because, you can walk around your neighborhood. At times, people were even walking around their homes, just slow walking around their living room. We did sessions like that. So that was a way to use technology to create connection, bring music in and all that. I remember doing a project with a string quartet, and it's funny, full circle with the Metropolitan Museum of Art. They're the resident string quartet of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So it just coincidental. So they have continued a residency playing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And we decided to do a virtual concert together on the Met website. So we created this using new technology that actually came out of the pandemic, allowing for you to sync with other musicians without latency.
Okay.
Oh, it was incredible. So we actually played together.
Yeah.
5 of us. So, 4 members of the quartet and me, all in different locations with backgrounds and boxes and put with visuals and playing.
Yeah, with no latency. Somebody there was another guest who's a djembe, a drummer, and he was sharing with me the challenge of not having technology that it's out there. Is it like a public tool that now people?
Yeah, now it's I can't remember what it's called now, but my team put it together. Great, fantastic.
Yeah.
So, and we did this gorgeous. I think it's still up. This beautiful, 15-minute performance on the Mets page, and I think it's on Facebook now on the Facebook page for the Metropolitan Museum somewhere. But it was a stunning piece of art, that we created, during that time, and many things like that. I mean, I created a kids drawing program during the pandemic where, all these kids at home, parents didn't know what to do with them. So I was like, okay, let's do something for kids. So I did a concert for kids with puppets. Yeah. Like little hand puppets and things to entertain them, playing music, and then drawing. So they would have a printout that a PDF they would print out. Yeah. They can draw and get into a mindfulness state and get into their own flow state with music and art and all that. So all these things. I think, going forward, now I go to different beautiful locations and I'll just film there. I just filmed at a beautiful Buddhist temple. I filmed in the Sequoias. I filmed in Death Valley. I film all over. Mm-hmm. And then we put that out there. Yeah. And just bring a little nature, to people that might not be able to go to those locations, so using technology, in that way. But already, just using the headphones for all these concerts, it's already using technology in a way that at first it could seem like it's separative, like it's going to, wait, I'm putting these headphones on. Isn't that going to disconnect me from others? Yeah. No, it turns out that you actually feel more connected.
Mm-hmm. Could you describe to me a desirable human future incorporating the modalities of technology, music, mindfulness? How do you see that? What does the desirable future look like for you?
Well, I think it's just more people engaging in the enterprise, in the project of consciousness. I think that's what I think we're moving into, is more people recognizing that it's even a worthwhile endeavor, right, to pursue this, whether that's meditation, mindfulness modalities, breath work, all that. So, but using music now in this way is this burgeoning, I think, area that is extremely accessible to people. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people put up walls of resistance around certain traditions, certain jargon, certain terminology. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's foreign. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. Yeah. Am I going to have to believe weird things? I don't know. But music has much less of that. Much less of that. Mm-hmm. So it's a beautiful, very accessible doorway to all this. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think it's such a universal, we call music the universal language, because, we can all feel it and relate to it. And it doesn't come with a lot of that, a lot of that baggage.
100%. And what do you think about AI generated music? Where does that lie? Like, is that a real experience? Or
the AI tools today, and certainly, years from now, are going to be phenomenal at generating any music you want of any kind. Having said that, I jokingly tell people, I think I have the most well-insulated and protected job in the realm of AI because it's not about just generating a recording and putting it out there.
Right.
If that was my business, not great. But no, my quote business, my work is human to human. Yeah. It's about a human being, sharing, expressing with other human beings, participating, I tell people in the beginning, when they come in the intro, I'm like, I invite you to shift the frame of thinking of this like an audience and a performer. It looks like that, it kind of looks like that.
Yeah.
You've got hundreds of people, but I put them in a circle, first of all. Yeah. So it has this kind of space that it's holding.
Yep.
The piano's in the middle. And I invite them to shift from audience performer to all of us being participants in this grand experiment, in this grand project. Mm-hmm. And it really is that, because when you look around, everyone is contributing to the experience of the other. Mm-hmm. And, during the concert, some people get up and they walk the shoreline. Yeah. You'll see a person in contemplation, having their moment, 100 yards away. You'll see a couple embracing, looking out at the sunset. You'll see kids playing in the sand. You'll see all kinds of things. You'll see someone standing on their head. You'll see someone else moving, finding expression through dance or movement. So we're all contributing. We're all participating. So it's not whether someone's contributing, but it's how they're contributing, or if they're contributing consciously or unconsciously. So I invite them into that framing of it. Yeah. And that, I think, is really powerful and inclusive. And so I think that's more how I think about that.
Mm-hmm. Man, this is, I think, a beautiful way for us to wrap up the conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of the knowledge and insight and perspective that you have. Any last thoughts of nuggets of wisdom, maybe directions you want to send people to? Any last parting words before we close?
Well, I think in terms of what you just asked around opening up into the endeavor of more people exploring consciousness and more self-awareness and ultimately more self-actualization, more, and a beautiful, authentic expression, right? Honoring that uniqueness of each person and really seeing them and allowing them to flourish. That shifts us from this game of survival we talked about, right? Mm-hmm. That mindset that, maybe I was at when I was 16 and 18, but shifting it from a game of survival to a game of, thriving. And when we lean into our values, our purpose, when we lean into what we can call our dharma, which is, what is it that when you're doing it, you're feeling closer to that universal connection? Call it source, call it whatever you want, right? What is it that is putting you into that flow state most naturally, most easily, whatever it is? And can you do more of that, right? Can you share more of that? Because ultimately, I'm a big believer in any change we want to see out in the world, we must do ourselves first. Yeah. And so that's why what I do today is an extension of my personal practice that I've done for decades. Mm-hmm. And yes, I've fine-tuned it, I've developed it, I've evolved it, I've honed it, but it's what I've always done personally. And now it's expanding, and it's not just future facing, but I also dug deep into the past. I studied deeply ancient Vedic traditions so that I could really bring the past lineage, connect it with the present into the future so that they all merge as one expression. So that's available to all of us, each in our own way. So I encourage everyone listening to, find their own pathway through this infinite, maze of the living experience. It truly has wonder and awe just waiting.
Beautiful, man. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And I'll see you on the next one. Thank you. Yeah.